Hey everyone, Sam here, otherwise known as FPL Pricey. Today we've got 5 players that you're going to want to keep your eye on ahead of the coming game weeks, including one that I believe could be the bargain of the season. Right, so first up, let's get the most obvious one, or at least one of the most obvious ones, out of the way. So Son Heung-min came onto the scene this week with 3 goals, obviously bagging the hat-trick against Burnley away from home. And it's clear to see why he would be such a target for so many managers ahead of Game Week 5. Sheffield United at home is also a great fixture in Game Week 5, so it's a great hopping on point. However, what I want to do is try and balance out the argument a little bit, because over the last few weeks, we've all gotten a bit excited with one performance at a time, hopped on a player, and then it turns out that maybe we want to just readjust our mindset just that little bit because we might get a bit overexcited based on one performance. Son Heung-min, obviously hat-trick in Game Week 4, but before then wasn't looking too fantastic. Now, I want to dive into the reasons behind that to see whether or not he would be a good pick moving forwards, or whether it's a bit of a one-off performance against a pretty open Burnley side that probably played into Spurs' hands just that little bit too much. Now, the reason that Son probably wasn't performing that well in the opening 3 game weeks is actually because he was playing wide on the left, which he has played a lot in the past, but in the past he was also very good at linking up with Harry Kane, who he's been missing a lot this season, and maybe played that inside forward role a little bit more than a proper true winger, as it were. This season he is hugging the left wing, or at least was hugging the left wing in the first 3 game weeks, meaning he wasn't actually getting that much of a sight on goal and playing much more into Postecoglou's plans and their strategy, which obviously favoured Spurs, but not necessarily Son Heung-min in particular. Now, what happened in Game Week 4 is really important to how we perceive him moving forward. So in Game Week 4, Richarlison was dropped to the bench, possibly because of an injury he picked up in the League Cup, but also possibly because he wasn't really showing the form that you'd want to see from a striker for Spurs. Son Heung-min moved into that central forward role where he's played before and played actually pretty well when Harry Kane wasn't fit. So we know he's got a bit of history there, although it was a few seasons ago. So I personally wanted to see a few matches of him in that centre-forward role before hopping onto him, or before having any confidence in him. However, what we saw against Burnley was absolutely fantastic. It really played into his hands. Pretty much all of the chances dropped to him. Maddison in the hole behind him, as well as that dual 9 role, or dual 10 role almost, with Son, dropping in and out of that striker spot and also feeding Son as well in behind against a pretty high line Burnley as well, one that was pressing onto them, favoured Spurs, but at the same time Son was able to capitalise, and historically he has been a very good finisher, so we know if he's in those positions and he gets those chances, he's going to net them more often than not. 0.38 XG per 90. Now that is heavily weighted towards Game Week 4, so before then it was looking a lot lower. Now, overall, it's looking like 0.60 XGI per 90, and we don't actually know whether he's going to be on penalties or not either. My guess would be that after the hat-trick, and because he's Spurs captain, he probably will be on penalties, which is another string to his bow as well. So he could be a fantastic asset, but as I mentioned, 9.1 million is pretty tough to get to. That Luton game in Game Week 8 is really interesting to me, though, because I'm potentially looking at wildcarding in Game Week 9. If I do that, Luton away could be a really good 1-week punt territory for Son Heung-min, so I'm potentially looking at bringing him in then. The other option is you do it right away, you get the benefit of Sheffield United at home, and then Arsenal-Liverpool, you kind of just ride out, hope that they play that high line and Son can get in behind. The other really important thing with Son is he's got to keep playing in that centre-forward role. Now, Richarlison's going to want minutes. He can play off the wing as well, but I don't think that's his favoured position. So there is an argument to say maybe give him another week or 2 just to see whether or not he continues in that role. And actually Luton away from home in Game Week 8 might be that perfect opportunity to jump on him ahead of some really good fixtures for Spurs, even if you're not wildcarding in Game Week 9 as well. So for me, he is high on my watch list. I'm really tempted to get him immediately, but I'm trying to just balance out that 1 week of pure gold by Son with the 3 weeks we saw previously, and also the idea that the fixtures aren't fantastic and we don't know that he's going to definitely be playing centre forward. I think it looks pretty likely considering he's just bagged a hat-trick away from home, but you never know, and I think it's one of those where I could potentially just give it a week, especially if you've already got Maddison in the side, which I do. So the second player I wanted to talk about also bagged 3 returns in game week 4, and that is Julian Alvarez. Now, albeit that was 1 goal and 2 assists, and actually that's quite important to the point I want to make about Julian Alvarez. He is climbing in ownership. He is climbing in his price as well, up to 6.7 million from 6.5 as a starting point. And he is going to be fantastic value for money if he continues getting 90 minutes, which so far, so good. He is getting 90 in every single game he's played. I think he came off on the 89th minute in game week 4, but the game was obviously already wrapped up and he'd already bagged 3 returns and gotten 2 bonus points. So owners are going to be absolutely delighted, and I can completely see why people want to bring him in at the moment. The underlying data is also looking pretty good. 0.49 XG per 90 for a striker is good, but it's not Erling Haaland levels. Because Haaland and City play in that one striker system, Alvarez is technically playing out of position in the wrong way. Now, in a team as attacking as City, there's an easy argument to make that that doesn't really matter, but across the season I do think it could potentially cause Alvarez some issues because of the depth they've got in that midfield now. Now, the positions he's playing at the moment are either on the wing or in the 8 role, or potentially even in that sort of ghost 10 role as well, but there are other players that can come in and play in those roles as well. Obviously, they've got Bernardo Silva waiting in the wings, who's been injured recently, who will probably come in at some point. Foden can play in those roles as well. And then you've also got Doku and Nunez who've come in over the summer. So all of these players will be vying for a spot, and over time they're going to want minutes in this side. So Alvarez, even though he's getting 90 minutes week in, week out at the moment, I'm still that little bit nervous about consistent starts moving forwards. Now, I'm a Foden owner and I'm considering selling him in the next few game weeks for the exact same reason, that even though the returns are coming, and if he's in the lineup, I'm sure they'll keep flowing, especially with the fixtures ahead, by the way. The next 3 look still pretty ideal for City assets. I'm still just that little bit nervous that at some point at random we're going to get given a headache because they're not going to be starting games all of a sudden. So with Alvarez, whilst he's in the side at 6.7 million, is fantastic value for money, but just be that little bit careful, or maybe have someone on your bench ready just in case he does get rotated out of the side. Final thing to note with Alvarez is obviously he's going to South America to play for Argentina over the international break. Now, normally that wouldn't be such an issue that I would be worried about when looking at transfers for the future game weeks. However, Argentina are playing away in Bolivia on Tuesday, the 12th of September. Now, Bolivia probably wouldn't stand out to many people as being an issue, but what it is very, very high altitude. So I think it's about 5,000 meters above sea level. That's going to be a very dense atmosphere. It's going to be hard to play in. And because then he's also got to travel back to the UK to then play it over the weekend, that could be quite a tough turnaround for any player, and they might consider that when picking their starting 11 for game week 5. So that is one to think about. I'm not saying he's necessarily going to be benched in game week 5, but it's just one to keep an eye on. If he gets 90 minutes in Bolivia, then maybe just have a look at whether you think he's essential for game week 5 or not. Pausing the video right here really quickly to say, if you're enjoying it so far, then please remember to give it a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on any future content. Everyone who's already done so, thank you so much. I really, really appreciate the support. Anyway, back to the video. Could Evan Ferguson be the next big thing in FPL? Well, there's certainly an argument to say he could be. At 5.9 million, he is a massive bargain. And after a hat-trick against Newcastle, I think it's fair to say that he's firmly on the radar of most FPL managers now. Now, there was a lot of hype coming into this season after performances in the 22-23 season as well. And Brighton fans in particular do think that he's going to be the next big thing at Brighton, and then also possibly in world football by the sounds of it. Like I said, he's still at 5.9 million. Now, that is mainly because no one was completely convinced that he was going to be a regular starter for Brighton. Because they play in Europe as well, and they've got quite a few attacking options, there was no guarantee that he was going to be that talismanic forward getting 90 minutes week in, week out. And to be fair, so far this season, we haven't seen him to be that either. The last 2 matches he has started and looked good, led the line fantastically well against Newcastle, who are obviously historically a very good defence. Bagging the hat-trick is a huge statement, and he's going to be on a lot of teams' radars moving forwards. That XG per 90 of 1.12 on the surface looks absolutely phenomenal. That is Erling Haaland levels of XG. However, what I would say is because it's per 90 and he hasn't been getting those 90 minutes regularly so far, that is going to be slightly skewed, or in his case, quite extremely skewed, because most of the minutes he's gotten so far, or at least a lot of the minutes, were in that Newcastle game. So over 1 XG per 90 makes a lot more sense when you think about the fact that the minutes he has been playing for, he's been getting those chances and getting those returns. So it is a very short sample size. And when you look at the games ahead, Man United, Bournemouth and Aston Villa in 5, 6, 7, I actually don't mind. Now, I think Man United isn't obviously an easy fixture, especially away from home, but it looks like Man United could be without quite a few of their first team centre-backs, and also Luke Shaw looks out for quite a long time as well, meaning that quite likely we're going to be looking at Harry Maguire and Johnny Evans in that back four. So against Man United away from home, I don't think that's a bad fixture at all. And I think a lot of managers will probably not pick Evan Ferguson this week because on paper, it doesn't look like a great fixture. After that, Bournemouth at home, absolutely fantastic. Aston Villa away from home have been leaking goals as well this season, so no problems whatsoever with that. After that, that's when it gets tough. Liverpool at home and Man City away from home are two pretty tough fixtures back to back. Obviously, Liverpool haven't looked the best defensively so far, but those aren't the ideal fixtures for him. So I think overall, a lot of managers are going to be put off of buying Evan Ferguson. And also, because he's not been getting 90 minutes so far, and there are a lot of other options at Brighton, I don't think too many people are going to go there. As you can see, he's still 7.0% owned. That will probably climb to something around 8 or 9, maybe 10% by the game week 5 deadline, but he's still going to be relatively differential. And if you're convinced that he's going to be the next big thing in FPL, then maybe you can get on him early at 5.9 million, ride the price rises when he keeps scoring goals, and really enjoy all of those points whilst he's still a differential. When a lot of other strikers at the moment, by the way, are not performing that well, maybe Evan Ferguson is the answer, and a cheap one at that. Right, I'm going to keep this one fairly short and fairly sweet because I don't think many people are going to be looking at Kieran Trippier as an option this game week, especially considering so far, after 4 game weeks, he's only bagged 5 points. Now, what I don't want to fall into the trap with as a content creator is only recommending the players that have been bagging loads and loads of points already. I want to try and recommend someone that might be getting ahead of the curve rather than just reacting to points that have already happened. Kieran Trippier at 6.5 million is an expensive defender, and I'm actually quite amazed to see him at 30% ownership. Now, what I do think is the case here is he'll be in a lot of teams that are probably going to act like zombie teams this season, or dead teams after game week 5 or game week 6, when a lot of managers who aren't as into FPL as people who are probably watching this video are, will probably give up on the game and won't really impact the top ranks moving forwards, or certainly by the end of the season. So I don't think his ownership in that top million or top 100k is going to be anywhere near 30% owned. In fact, I think it's going to be pretty differential at the moment. Looking at the fixtures ahead, Kieran Trippier could potentially be one to hop on. Now, Newcastle so far this season haven't looked amazing defensively, haven't kept any clean sheets, but historically we know them to be a pretty decent defence. Botman will hopefully be back in game week 5 as well, so that will bolster their defence so they can hopefully go back to their favoured back four. Trippier on the right as well has been getting 90 minutes week in, week out. One thing that I was a little bit cautious of is Trippier is getting a bit older. He will probably be prioritised more for the Champions League, especially with the group they've been given, by the way, as well, which looks like a bit of a group of death. And Livramento has been signed as that deputy at right back, who is, as a Saints fan, I can tell you, a very, very talented young player. So he'll want to get minutes at some point this season. So Trippier might not be that reliable 90-minute man that we know and love from last season. But over the next few game weeks, game week 5, Brentford at home, probably not the best hopping on point. But after that, game week 6, Sheffield United, followed by Burnley, West Ham, Crystal Palace. That is a great run of fixtures for potential clean sheets and potentially attacking returns for Trippier, who is still going to be on the lion's share of set pieces moving forwards. If Newcastle do keep a clean sheet, it's pretty likely that Trippier is the one that's going to be maxing out on the bonus points, because he is the one out of all defenders at Newcastle that racks up the most passes, creates the most chances, and ranks highly on the BPS. Now, if Newcastle do keep clean sheets in the next few games, then Trippier is most likely to be the one that's racking up the big points. Now, he is a hard price point to get to, and not many managers will be able to get to him if they haven't already made room and budget for him. So if you're able to get to him by game week 5 or game week 6, if he keeps getting those 90 minutes week in, week out, I think he could be the next big thing in FPL, and a pretty difficult one to get to for other managers. So if you want to get ahead of the curve, Kieran Trippier potentially could be the answer. The final player I want to talk about today is a bit of a spicy one, and obviously one that creates a lot of controversy in FPL. That is Darwin Nunez. Now, 2 goals and 2 assists in his last 2 matches. Fantastic underlying data as well. 1.48 XG per 90. In theory, this guy should be absolutely essential to our teams. Liverpool, one of the most attacking teams in the league, rack up the XG every single week. And Darwin Nunez played as that centre forward as well, gets those attacking returns pretty much whenever he's in the side at the moment. So in theory, should be an absolute lock in our teams. The major issue with Darwin Nunez is, do we know he's going to continue starting matches? Only 2 matches ago, he wasn't starting at all. Obviously came off the bench late on against Newcastle, scored 2 goals, got the win, and obviously got his starting spot locked in against Aston Villa because of that performance. Now it could be the time to start considering hopping on to Darwin Nunez now he's starting games. The risk is, will he continue to start games? Now, obviously, Liverpool have a lot of attacking options to pick from. Gakpo can play centre forward, Salah can play centre forward sometimes if he wants to, and Jota can play up there as well. So Darwin Nunez has a lot of competition for his place. But considering how he's been playing recently, I think he's probably going to start the next couple of games and get given that chance. The reason he hasn't been starting every single game is because Jurgen Klopp doesn't like his pressing game that much, especially in comparison to Gakpo and Jota. So he's been favouring playing one of those 2 players up there, up top, because he likes the way they press. Darwin Nunez doesn't have that same game intelligence, or at least in Klopp's mind, he doesn't anyway. And he's more of a nice to have, a luxury player in the games that Liverpool probably don't need to worry about pressing so much, and they're more favoured to win. Now let's have a look at the next 5 fixtures, because Wolves away, West Ham at home, Spurs away, Brighton away, 2 tough games, but both teams are leaking goals at the moment and pretty frail at the back, play high lines. Darwin Nunez could capitalise on both of those games, and Everton at home in game week 9, no debate there. Those are fantastic fixtures. So over the next 5, I would argue that in at least 3 of them, that being the Wolves, the West Ham and the Everton game, he'll probably be the favoured striker, especially in the form he's in, and the fact that the pressing game won't be as important in those games. Nunez seems like a pretty good pick for those matches, because I think he's pretty likely to start. The Tottenham and the Brighton game, obviously not ideal, but like I mentioned, because they do play that high line, they do play high risk football now, both of those teams are leaking goals at the back, and maybe Klopp will look at Nunez after hopefully 2 more good games against Wolves and West Ham and think, I need to keep him in my side, I need to have him against those 2 defences to give them question marks, to give them something to think about at the back, and hopefully make them panic, because as we know, Nunez is a bit of an agent of chaos. He could ruffle a few feathers even in the bigger games at the moment as well. So those are the 5 players on my watch list ahead of game week 5, but please do let me know what you think of them in the comments below, and who are the players on your watch list ahead of the game week 5 deadline. I hope you all really enjoy the international break, but do remember I've got plenty of really good content coming over the next 2 weeks, including a wildcard side for game week 5 that I really like the look of. In the meantime, if you enjoyed the video, please remember to like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on any of that future content. But for now, do enjoy the break, and I'll see you later on in the week for that wildcard team.